Hey everybody, I'm here today to show you some tips and tricks for steering while driving. In this video, I'll be going over some basic tips and some basic tricks for steering while driving. These will allow you to steer a car better, more effectively, and properly while driving. Without further ado, let's get right into the video. The first tip and trick that I want to go over is to use two hands on the steering wheel as often as possible. Now, I completely understand that if you're driving a manual car, that driving with two hands on the steering wheel all the time is just simply not going to work. It's not practical. And I drove a manual car for many, many years, so I know from firsthand experience that driving like this the entire time just doesn't work. You have to shift while you're turning sometimes, while you're driving straight. You have to upshift, you have to downshift, and so forth. So with that being said, I'm not going to tell you to drive with two hands all the time, because that's not practical. Even if you're driving an automatic car, you have to touch the controls. You might have to get something on the passenger seat, whatever the case is. You might have to drink a sip of water, whatever the case is. You're going to have to take one hand off the wheel. So I'm telling you to keep two hands on the wheel as often as possible. The simple fact of the matter is that driving with two hands, or I should say steering with two hands, is more effective and allows you to have more control than steering with one hand. You can be great at steering with one hand. You can have 99% control, while steering with one hand, but steering with two hands is going to give you 100%. It's as simple as that. So just try to keep two hands on the wheel while steering the car as often as possible. The next tip and trick that I want to go over is to look ahead. Now, one of the main mistakes or errors that beginner drivers make is that they look in front of their hood. They look at the hood of their car, or they look just in front of the hood of their car. And what that does is that causes them to make these micro adjustments while they're steering. Maybe they're driving on a straight road, and instead of, making these tiny little adjustments, they end up making these aggressive gestures because they're trying to straighten out. And they steer to the right too much, therefore they have to steer to the left to correct that. Too much. Then they have to steer to the right to correct that. And they end up just going like this down the road. Now, obviously it looks, more like this, but they end up going right, left down the road. Even throughout their turns, instead of making a smooth turn, they're kind of adjusting throughout the turn when they look too close in front of their car. So I'm telling you to look further ahead in front of your car. The further that you look, the better gauge that you'll have for your steering. It's better when you are actually driving in a straight line, when you're going through a curve in the road, or even when you're turning. You want to look ahead of the pathway that you're driving. Now, obviously, your peripheral vision is going to show you in front of the car, so you can actually see in front of the car, any obstacles, anything like that. But, you should be looking and focusing further ahead. All right, moving forward to the next tip and trick, posture matters, okay? If you drive like this, all slouched over like this, one arm is out the window, obviously it's going to be difficult for you to be good at steering the car. Posture matters. You want to have a nice, relatively straight posture. You want to be sitting, a little bit further forward. I just filmed another video and I had to lean back a little bit for the camera angle. That's why my seat was like that. But generally speaking, I'd be sitting like this. You want to have your shoulders facing the front of the car. Now, I know that you might be tempted for your shoulders to face the center of the car because of all the controls and just generally looking at the center of the car, but your shoulders should be facing directly where the steering wheel is, just like this. Should be a nice straight line to where the steering wheel is. It's as simple as that. Posture, having the right posture, having good posture is going to allow you to steer a car much better, much more effectively. All right, moving forward, you want to try for smooth maneuvers. Now, as a beginner driver, like I said, you're probably going to be a little bit left and right, when you're doing stuff, but you want to practice for smooth maneuvers. Generally speaking, for something like a right-hand turn, you should be turning the steering wheel in one smooth motion, holding it in place throughout the turn, and then releasing it. And when you release the wheel, obviously you're going to keep your hands around the wheel, but the wheel will come back towards the center just like that. Very important to try for smooth maneuvers. It will take you a while. It's not going to happen overnight, but you need to practice, right? If you see that, here's a good gauge. If you're driving and you have passengers in the car and you see that those passengers are sort of look like this as they're driving, they're moving around, that's a good hint that your driving is very aggressive and very left and right. What you want to do is you want to make sure that if you look at your passengers, they're going to move a little bit because of the road and because of your moving, but it's going to be like a little smooth. maybe back and forth, just like that, right? And that's a good gauge. And just ask them, you know, you really want to say to them, be honest with me. Is my driving smooth with regards to my steering? Tell me the truth. And if they say it's smooth, then just keep practicing. You know, you're doing okay. If they say, I need some work, well then, you know what? You really need to practice. So go to an empty parking lot, go to streets when there's like no traffic, and practice driving smoothly. Practice makes progression. Practice doesn't make perfection. Practice makes progression. So you have to, you know, obviously continue to practice. The next tip and trick is to keep control when using levers and buttons. Now, when you're driving, you know, and you're holding the steering wheel and you're not touching anything else, obviously it's going to give you the ideal driving situation. But the moment that you have to put on a turn signal, your hand has to move. The moment that you have to turn on the windshield wipers, your hand has to move. The moment that you have to defog the front windshield, or you have to adjust the radio or the air controls, your hand has to move. So my point is, get accustomed to all of the controls in your car. And figure out a way that when you're steering, you can adjust those things while still maintaining a safe, proper, effective, and smooth steering control of the car. Here's what I like to do. This is my little tip that I use, my little trick. When I'm holding the steering wheel just like this, right? I hold it at roughly the 10 and 2 position. When I have to use a turn signal, I only remove my left hand, I use the turn signal, and I move it over here to about the 9 o'clock position. Right? And I can use the turn signal while still holding the wheel. Now I have about the 2 and 9 position. When I'm done using my turn signal, I move it back to the 10 position. If I need to use my windshield wipers, I take my right hand, I move it from the 2 to the 3. I can now use my windshield wipers while still maintaining control of the steering wheel. When I'm done with the windshield wipers, I move it back to the 2. Same thing, you know, if I have to adjust the radio controls, I'll do it quickly. If I have to adjust the climate controls, I'll do it quickly. Very simple and straightforward. The last tip and trick that I want to go over is to not be afraid to use different steering methods. Now, like I said, when I turn, I generally use hand-over-hand steering, which looks something like this, right? This is hand-over-hand steering. That's generally what I use most of the time. But in certain situations, I use one-handed steering, depending on the situation, right? And in other situations, I use push-pull steering, right? So the key is you want to have a steering method that you use most of the time. Like we'll call it 95% of the time. But then you want to not be afraid to use other steering methods too, because other steering methods might be better for certain situations. If I want to turn the wheel fast, I'm going hand over hand, 100% hand over hand, right? If I need to turn or steer while I'm adjusting something or, you know, doing something with this hand, then I'm using one-handed steering because it allows me to control the wheel and turn the wheel while I'm doing something over here. Okay? And then if I'm taking a very slow turn, or if I'm driving, you know, through a curve on the highway maybe, I'm going to use push-pull because I'm in a nice relaxed position like this, right? A nice relaxed position. My arms are, instead of being up here, they're just down here, right? That's why. It all depends on the situation. So don't be afraid to use different steering methods. And that's basically it. In this video, I've gone over some tips and tricks for steering while driving. I really hope that you've enjoyed this video. If you liked the video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. Let me know what you think down below as a comment. What are some other tips and tricks for steering while driving? Let me know down below as a comment. And of course, be sure to subscribe for more great car and driving videos just like this one. And that's all I have for you today. Thanks for watching.